from the things that I've done. Okay, so this, guys, is not a critique to one student. It is something that all of you need to apply in the class. Okay, so let's simply start checking things. So one of the things that I asked you guys to do was to establish your contacts 12 frames apart, and then when you add passing poses, there will be 6 frames apart. So we do start well. We're going from 1 to 7, which is 6 difference, and then 7 to 13, another 6. Here we have a little problem. We're going from 13 to 20, which is 7 frames. Okay. So basically, the second passing pose should be on frame 19, not on 20. So how to move the keys? Wait, you have a question? Okay. So we did do a very similar thing when we timed the ball as well as the car. So this is still just reinforcing the idea in case you forgot. Okay, so when you're moving the keys in a timeline, you have to remember to select everything before you do so, because you don't want to select just some body parts and leave the other parts behind. Then you end up with keys on 2 different places, and animation is gonna be really jerky and popping. So when you move a key, then you move all the body parts. Okay, so I'm clicking on select all. So I can move the keys by selecting them, by key selecting them in the graph editor. Or the easier way is to select the key in a timeline. Okay, so if I select the key in timeline, I need to press and hold the shift and a simple left mouse click to get the key selected red. So now it's really important that you click on a midpoint of the red selection, press and hold the middle mouse. Simply by holding it, just drag to the key where the pose needs to be. To double check if everything was moved, so that to make sure that nothing has been left on frame 20, what you need to do is make sure on the top that you can only select the curves, and I can zoom out so you can actually get all the selection curves in one of the windows and then marquee select. Okay, so if I left something on frame 20, I would see a red line on frame 20. So there's no red line on frame 20, that means I managed to move everything that I needed to move. That makes sense? Do I need to repeat this? There are quite a few of you guys who didn't have some of the keys on the right frames. Okay, that's fine. Does that make sense? You can also move a group of like 2 keys or all of them if you needed to. Just need to, in that case, you'll still select all, hold on shift, then simply try to catch the group of the keys that you need to move, and then you still go to the center of that red selection and move it where you need the keys to be. So that's the way to change the timing. If something happens sooner, that's going to make a previous key move faster. Okay, so that's one thing. So the other thing that's kind of basic thing is, and I do not understand, I mean, I understand your logic, I just cannot convince you guys that it's a faulty logic. When I tell students don't leave antennae symmetrical, and they still do on the basis, oh, I'm going to do this later. I know that 90% of the students who leave it for later never fix those antennas. It just happens. If you think that it's not important, it is not going to hurt your grade. It is important and does affect your grade. And it does show the emotion of the character. Okay, so that's another thing I would fix. The easiest, the fastest thing that I'm expecting from you guys is simply make at least one of the antennae slightly more bent than the other. So if I select one of the antennae, and I like to start on frame 1 when I do something general. Okay? So I click on frame 1, select the antennae. I usually try to bend the antennae that is further away from the camera. Why? Because that way the antennae will not cross. If I take the right antenna of this guy, if I bend it down, you see, I'm going to do this. You see how they cross. So the negative space is a little bit diminished. Especially if you do something like this, when the top of the antenna touches. So this is really even worse negative space in silhouette. And you know, you cannot always, especially if the character is turning around in the scene, you cannot always get it perfect, but in such a simple scene, try to get it as perfect as possible, because it's really about being aware of the things that you need to be doing when you animate. This is not just for the walk. When you animate any scene, you want to avoid symmetrical antennae. So basically, all I do is take this antenna and slight little difference, and this is as simple as it could be. Notice that I have still turned the antenna in all three axes. I didn't just bend it forward. Okay, so now you say, well, I did change the antenna on frame 1, so how can I really fast do the change on all the other poses, because they still don't have that antenna position? Well, that's where the graph editor comes. Graph editor is really useful for stuff like this when you have something done on one pose and you really want to apply it to the other poses. Okay, so if I now select this antenna and look in a graph editor, I have rotate X, I have rotate Y, and I have rotate Z. Can you see the screen, guys? Is it large enough? If you're too far, please sit closer. There, guys, some of you who struggle sitting in the back row, please sit forward and take notes. Okay, so I do hope that it makes sense. See, the one of the keys, the first key, has a different value than all the other ones. So this is the change in the rotation in the Y, in Z axis. Okay, so that means this pose is good. All the other ones need to match that rotation in Z. How can I do this fast? Well, simply make sure you marquee select all the other keys, press Shift, press middle mouse, and bring all the keys down. Okay, so when you're doing something like this in the graph editor, it's really important. Bring this yellow line to one of your poses, or the pose that you're working with, so you can actually see the change that you're doing. So when I'm moving those values down, I'm bending the antenna. When you do something in a graph editor, it's going to stay the way you do it. You don't have to key it, but I have the habit to build the habit, I still just go and press the key all. Okay, so now I did adjust the Z rotation. I still have the X, I still have the Y rotation on that antenna, because I did rotate it in all three axes. So again, I see on frame 1, well, that's the change that I've done, and I want all the other keys to match. So select them, up. Again, I did not look, that's bad. Really want to look at what you're doing. That makes sense, guys? What I'm doing here? Yeah. And when you're moving the keys like this in a graph editor, it tends to snap to an existing value. And by default, it will do unless you change the settings somehow. Okay, so now on all of those poses, those antennae have that basic asymmetrical position. That makes sense? So in the same or similar way, you can fix the feed. Okay. So this feed here, we have on one passing poses, you see this, those feet, that they are correctly turned to rotate, they are rotated away from each other, but then suddenly, on this passing pose, they turn inwards. Okay, so that makes the toes slide on the ground. That's not good. So feet on this pose need to have the same rotation as any other pose when they're on the ground. Does that make sense? So how can I fix this fast and be sure that you've done it correctly? Well, you can check the numbers of the Y rotations and then copy and paste that number on this pose. So the problem is really that instead of positive 16, we have a negative value typed in. So I can simply change this from positive to the negative values. I mean, from negative to positive to turn it other way. Okay? So this stuff like this happens when you start just typing the numbers without looking your pose. Because if you look your pose, you would notice that, okay, something is not right here. So it's really important that if you're using the graph editor or typing the numbers in the channel box editor, always look to what you're doing is doing to the pose itself. Please. Okay, so I could change the number there in the channel box editor, but I do want to teach you how to use the graph editor. So let's take a look at the Y rotation of that foot. So if I click on Y rotation, see what's happening here. There is, the graph editor tells me in the place where the foot is doing something wrong, we have a different value. So what I need to do, guys, is simply move this value and match it to all the other ones. Make sense? See how it turns the foot? When the foot is raised, I don't mind if you change the rotation because it's not on the ground, so that's fine with me. But the easiest thing would still be to just keep it consistent. Or have a little bit less change if you want to change. I mean, if you lift the leg up and it's kind of dragging, it's very likely that that rotation would really change a little bit. Make sense? It wouldn't stay perfectly firm exactly as it is. Any questions about it? Okay, so what else can we check and fix in here? There are some of you guys who have the feet move sideways as they're touching the ground. So if I select one leg and then look at the translate X, oh, we have that problem here. Okay. See, so all of the feet positions, they move in under the body. But this one foot is actually going outside. And it happens when the foot is on the ground. So that means that foot will slide sideways on the ground. Only sliding should be backwards. That make sense? I see a large number of students, especially those who should be looking up, still having their heads down in the laptop. That tells me you're not literally trying to learn what I'm teaching here, guys. You need to call the names because some of you are still not even looking up. Okay, so do you understand the problem with this foot? Please ask questions if you don't. It would really help if at least somebody would say, yeah, we got it. Thanks. You can assign a person who's going to be the cheerleader. Okay, so basically the left foot here on this pose, you put it on the ground, and then as it's kind of going backwards, taking a step forward, it also slides sideways. And that sideways motion is reflected by a change in a value on this key. So really, this key needs to match the other ones. Does that make sense? Let's see if we have the same problem on the other foot. Yes. Oh, this is on the foot that's raised up, so that's fine. That's pretty different. So as long as this foot is on the ground, it should not be sliding sideways. So one leg has a problem, but not the other. Okay, so let's see, what else can we do that's kind of general problem and issue? The arms are slightly overextended. That means that the selection boxes are moved a little bit too much down the arm. So please just kind of get close enough, select the arm, and think that you are moving this box up the arm towards the shoulder. So you just make sure that there's a little bend in that arm. And find a good point of view where you can see as the arm starts relaxing. Make sense?
Yes.
Get the key. Okay, so there's another problem that quite a few of you guys did, is when you did some changes on the first or on the last pose, you forgot to copy and paste to the other one. So remember, your first pose needs to be exactly the same as the last one. So I did, on the first pose, I have relaxed the arms, so I need to make sure that this happens on the last pose. So now there are two ways you can approach fixing this. You can select the whole body and copy and paste from one pose to the other, or you can just select the body parts that are changed. It's irrelevant to me which one of those two things you use, as long as there's no change in your poses. So I'm going to use the whole pose. So I'm going to select the whole pose. I have the frame 1 selected, so I click in a timeline on frame 1. So this is the pose that was adjusted, and I'm copying from. Okay? So now, I want to copy those values to 25. How do I do this? So I'm going to show you middle mouse technique. So I go to frame 1, just slightly right to the red key, press and hold, and drag to frame 25. Let go, and go to key hold and press key hold. So this should copy. See, there's no change. I have copied the values from the 1 to 25. You didn't get it? Can I repeat it? Okay.
Is there, other than workflow, is there any difference between doing that, clicking on 25 and right-click paste and then paste to?
Now this is the other way of doing this. I'm going to repeat this way, and I'm going to tell you the other way that might make more sense to you.
Okay.
You could also, the other way would be, okay, let's repeat it for you guys once again before I do the other way. Okay. So let me sure I undo this. Okay, so now you see there's a change in the arms. The 25 arms are different than they're on 1. So that's a sign I need to do something. So now you decide which one is correct. So 1 is not like overextended and locked, so I'm copying from 1 to 25. So what I have done is, so select all, click on select all, go to the timeline with your cursor, press and hold the middle mouse, and by holding it down, drag 25. Let go, and press your key hold. So it's important that you don't do any other steps between this, because you're going to lose your selection. This is not going to work. Okay, so now if I click on 1 and 25, you see guys, there's no change. So this is I like this way of copying and pasting. This is a little bit better in my opinion than the second way, which I'm going to show now. So the second way of doing this is simply copying and pasting. Okay. So the second way to do this is you still need to select all, especially if you want to copy the whole pose. Okay, so you still go with your cursor to frame 1. Make sure you click on it so it's selected. So now you can right mouse click and go to paste, and go to copy and click on copy. So then you can click in timeline on frame 25, right mouse click and go to paste. And you see it's just the one word paste. It's not the paste anymore. And click on paste, so that's going to produce the same result. You copy one post to another frame. Does that answer your question?
Do we have to key alt command after we paste that one?
Just a second. Yes. You copy there. Never thought about this. Paste. I just press the key alt just in case. That makes sense? If you need still help with copying and pasting, just to get help, ask the lab instructor or ask me after the lecture. Let's spend much more time there. Does anybody have any other questions that you thought of? Right.
Maybe you could cover center of gravity translation one more time on passing poses.
Okay. I will. Okay, so the center of gravity on passing poses. Those poses, on passing poses, we lift one leg up and taking a step forward, so we need to shift the weight over the leg that's on the ground. And that is reflected with a change of the value in translate x. Okay. So this is done correctly here. So the character, on a contact pose, the translate x has 0 value. That means that the hips are equally supported by both feet under the body. Okay, so all the passing poses have 0 translate x. And you see the pose, would you agree that the hips seem to be equally supported by both legs, both from the front view or if you look from the side view? If those hips fell down, they would kind of fall down in 2 legs. So, when you lift the leg up, you see how that sits? They just go a tiny bit to the left of the screen, which is this value at this point. Then if you go to the characters, character goes, puts another foot on the ground, and that shifts the weight on it. Then the value of the translate x goes up in the positive numbers. Okay? So I have students sometimes who don't look at the poses, and they kind of move the hips sideways, but they kind of do this. You understand why this is wrong?
Not exactly, because the character is all balanced.
Yes. See, when I move this pose down, when I move the key down, I'm actually moving the hips away from that leg.
Oh, I see what
To
you're
make it
saying.
unbalanced.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It
it needs to be about. So really, if you just try to remember the curves and how the curves then look without understanding why, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
We will go back to this more when we add up and down poses.
Yeah.
So, good. I mean, again, I would like to cover things that you guys struggle with. So the translate y. You understand the translate y is simply the up and down motion of the character. So really, At this point, I don't really care that much what you have in here, because we're gonna create a correct curve progression by adding the up and down poses. So theoretically speaking, there is one problem here, okay? You see on this second passing pose, how the heels are lifted off the ground. Well, on the passing pose, the feet should be flat on the ground. The problem is that this value is too high and it's pulling the leg up. We need to get the foot back down on the ground and lowering the hips. Make sense? Same on the first passing pose. This foot is a little bit less raised up, but it's still a little bit too high. So we need to lower just a tiny bit. So in this case, it is okay that we have both passing poses going in negative values, because that moves the hips down. And if you look at poses, it will make more sense. So let's see the other rotations. So we went over to constant X, constant Y, constant Z. Okay, so our character is not moving forward, so we have no change in the constant Z value. It's just the nature of a cycle. For the X, I have asked you please don't do X rotations because they can mess up the Y and Z rotations and make them harder to do them correctly. So I'm going to leave them at 0 and just think it's one less curve for you to pay attention to. So we have the Y rotation. Most of you did this correctly, although there are some students who did not do any rotations on hips, which is really a big mistake. I know you might have left it for later, but it needs to be done. So the main thing I'm looking is that you have a rotation value and that you are turning the hips in y-axis away from the leg. It's taking a step forward, and this is done correctly. On passing poses, we have no Y rotation. This is another thing that many of you have done. You have ended up having Y rotations in passing poses. If it was only a small change, something like this, I wouldn't even mind. And some of you really had a big change, or you even had an extreme change, which is completely wrong. So the best thing is simply to remember, in terms of the Y rotation, we don't need any on the passing pose. Why? If you think of it again, guys, what happens to your body? On a contact, I'm going to have that extreme turn in the body. So if I'm going in a passing pose, you see now my hips going from the extreme rotation into the neutral negative. So that's the 0, and it goes to reverse stride. Okay? So that's why it makes everything simpler if you just remember that you should not have much rotation in Y on passing poses because you're getting to the default 0 position on your way from two extremes. So when you establish, again, so on the contacts, I have extreme Y rotations. On a passing pose, I have no Y rotation. So that's a good Y rotation. This applies to low back, mid back, up back, and neck up. So finally, the hips. On passing poses, we want to establish the extreme Z rotation. Okay. And you remember I told you last time, I always have students who fight me on this, or it does not make sense to tilt the hips down. They want to tilt the hips up on this one. It's not correct. So take a note which side of the foot is raised, and then lower that same side of the hips. Don't lift it up. And it just seems like whenever I say, some students hear me say something different. And don't look at the PDFs. Make sure that what you're doing is right. That makes sense? Okay, so here, on passing poses, we have correct zero rotation on passing poses, and contacts have no zero rotation. And again, if it happens that you have a little change on contacts in Z, I wouldn't even mind. But if you do it completely wrong, there were some students who did this. They actually took the contacts and they created extreme values of contacts, and they had no rotation in Z on passing poses. So you have your extremes on wrong pose in terms of the Z rotation or Y rotation. So take note, download those PDFs, and establish those patterns correctly. Please. Okay, so let's see the time here, 1:49. So we find here. So we kind of went now through the hips. So when you're checking your animation, exactly the steps that I went myself talking here, those are the steps that you should do, guys, yourself when you check your animation. I'm not doing this for fun or to show off or anything else. I'm teaching you how to make sure you get this right. So now, next step is to check the spine rotation. There are many of you who neglected the spine. You just did 1 out of 3, or turned the spine in the wrong direction, or just left it at 0 rotation. Okay? It makes no sense to me. There were really just 2 poses that you had to learn how to do correctly, and some of you could not do this. I really like to know where's the problem, guys. Am I speaking Croatian? No. Or are you hearing me in some other language? Okay, let's keep moving. So the spine. So really, whenever I did with the hips, I do a very similar thing in checking the spine. Okay, so there are 2 ways to check the spine. You can go one at a time, starting at low back, and then check the rotated Y and see, is it turning in the opposite direction from the hips? Do we have 0 rotation in Y on passing pose? And then the next contact, is it turning in the opposite direction from the hips? And it is. So it's done well. Good job. Then you check the Z rotation. All we want to look is that, okay, so the hips are being tilted down, so that means that this low back is to be starting tilting up in the opposite direction from the hips. And how can you tell? Can you see how on the left side of this character we have a smaller distance? And here is, on the right side is larger. That means it's rotating away from the tilt of the hips. Can you tell that? And I can tell simply by looking at the graph editor, the pattern established that those steps are doing fine. So now then I would click on the next, mid back, and check again those 2 rotations. Or the faster way, if you can do it that way, is simply click on select the spine. And then, this is important, look up, guys, if you've never done this before. So when I click on my spine select, I get here in the graph editor the attributes for all 3 spine controls. So I want to focus only on Y rotation at first, and I want to focus on all 3 of them. So this is kind of important if you want to do it this way, that you click on the low back Y rotation control, press and hold Command, then go to the mid-back Y control and click on the left mouse, and then go to the up back, still holding command. Okay. So now what I'm seeing here in the graph editor are actually three curves. They just have exactly the same values and they sit on top of each other. That makes sense? Okay. So now if I take those keys and change their value, I have actually changed the value of all three spine controls. That makes sense? This is done fine, so I don't need to change anything. Okay? But, in the case I had something wrong, I can fix all three of them at the same time. If you're following the PDFs, and we're going to have podcasts for the final assignment. The way they do it, they end up with slightly different rotation values for each of those three spine controls. So you're going to actually see the points being slightly decreased or increased, which is no problem. That's fine. Either way you do this. So the next thing would be a similar way. I want to check the Z rotations. So I click on a low back, zero, rotate Z, press and hold command, click on the mid back, rotate Z, and then up back, rotate Z. So again, here in the graph editor, I'm looking at all three curves. If something goes wrong on one of those three keys or rotations, you would see that there will be one point that disagrees with what is correct. And so again, there's nothing needed to be fixed here because this is done correctly. And then the next step is checking the Y and Z rotations on leg up, which is another area where many of you guys struggle with. There are two main reasons for struggling with this. Some of you have keyed this control that's called low neck. Please don't do this. This is not included in key all, and it's going to make you think that something is wrong with the null button. So if you have anything on the low neck in terms of values here, zero them out, and then delete the key in the timeline. So this is fine. You did not do that mistake. Same applies for the head control. If there was some value on the head, I would zero it out and delete. You don't have to delete that key because we have left that active because we might need to do something with the head in our next assignment. Okay, so that makes sense what I'm talking here? Okay, so when you're checking your neck up, simply it's going to have, or I'm going to expect that you have a Y rotation and Z rotation. And same rule applies. So if I'm looking at the Y rotation, I need to have the head looking straight, and you're going to have a certain value that's making that happen. So on the contacts, I have extremes. On the passing pose, I have no rotation at all. Then looking at Z, okay, I know I need to have the Z rotation extremes on passing pose, so I'm checking first. Do my passing pose have extremes values? Yes, they do. And my contacts should have no Z rotation. That's correct as well. Okay, so when you do that much of checking, you might be ready to start considering adding the up and down poses. I still did not fix the locked arms on every single pose for the sake of the speed. Okay. The other thing I still might check is if you did use the correct controls to raise the feet up, and you did use the toe tip, toe lift, and translate Y. So that's a, use the correct controls to raise the foot up. Any questions? So I will not fix all the arms, so that will be the last thing to do. I will unlock those arms, and then I'm pretty much ready to start creating the down poses. Okay, so ready guys for up and down poses? So first we're going to go over down pose, because down poses have a few more things to remember. It makes them more of an extreme then the up pose. Okay, so what is the purpose of a down pose in our cycle? Well, as the name of those poses kind of indicates to some degree, I hope, is they show the ups and downs of the body, which really shows the weight of the character. How heavy is his weight to his feet or legs. So if he's carrying a heavy weight, he might bend his knees more than if you are just young and enthusiastic and full of energy and strong. In that case, your knees will not bend as much. There is still, our body will still be going up and down, just much more subtle scale. Okay, so if this may help you remember that after every contact, so basically when I go into a contact pose, I put my foot in the next position, but my weight is still dragging behind. So the weight of the whole body is still not there. It's somewhere here between the 2 feet, right? So the down pose also shows that the weight has arrived there. And also that little down is like a little spatial for going back up. So you're getting all or a bunch of animation principles in that down pose. Okay. In terms of those Y and Z rotations, the down poses, those values will be in between what we have established here in contact and passing pose. Okay. So before we go to the body rotations, I want to also stress out a couple of other specifics for the down pose. So in your contact, your arms have a certain arm swing, right? All of you did it correctly, and unless I missed some of this. Okay, so if, let's say that's the arm swing I have on a contact, as I'm going in down pose, I would like you guys to simply increase that swing a little bit. Okay. So Maya would want to do this. On a down pose, Maya will start moving the arms back. So Maya is not creating the arm swing correctly. You have to take note of what's happening on your contact, and a down pose increasing a bit. And we also add a little bit of wrist action to show like the fingers still want to keep moving as the arm has reached its extension. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Let's see. Back foot is another specific. On the down poses, I'm going to ask you guys to lift the back foot up. So if the contact is placed in this position, on a down pose, this is what's going to happen. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of starts lifting up. Don't move it too much forward. Actually, since it's a cycle, the foot will appear to move a little bit back, but that's because the ground pulls it backwards more than it moves forward. Okay, let's see this one. So I'm going to do this now. Okay, so I have a contact on frame 1 and passing pose on frame 7. So on frame 4, I'm going to add down pose. So again, I can start building this down pose from whatever you want to. I can use a T pose, I can use a previous key, or I can use my in-between. I will use my in-between again, because if you did the body rotations correctly on contact and passing pose, Maya is going to give you a pretty good job in terms of the body rotations. You still should not just leave and assume that Maya did a good job. You still need to check it and fix some things if they went wrong. Specifically, favoring. Okay, so I'm selecting all, switching to auto tangents for a moment, which gives me bed in between on frame 4, which I'm going to take anyway by keying it. I'm going to switch back to step, because I want to keep working in step. I'm not concerned about smooth movement yet. I want to have correct poses first. Okay. So this is my starting point, and I'm starting with a foot that's carrying the weight, the foot on the ground. So the contact, we have put the right foot forward, so that's the one that carries the weight and starts sliding backwards, since the treadmill is pulling it backwards. Okay, so what needs to happen with this foot? Okay, so in terms of the backwards motion, if we placed it on just at Z12, and it's going towards the 0 value, the midpoint would be 6. So Maya has put 7.5, I would type in 6, press enter, and key. So it goes 12, 6, 0, negative 6, negative 12. Make sense? Okay, then this foot needs to be flat on the ground. Numbers. What is keeping it up? It's the heel. I'll zero that out. And please zero out the toe lift as well. Get the foot flat on the ground and key. Okay, so now this foot is ready to hold the weight. So the other foot. So I said this foot needs to start, the back foot needs to start lifting up. Okay, so it kind of appears that Maya has done what I asked for, but it's not doing it correctly. And Maya cannot account for the backwards motion of the ground and the feet. So we need to kind of tweak this foot a little bit. Okay, so first thing is, the raised foot, remember I asked you, please do not raise the foot by using heel and lift heel. That's what you look to use on contacts. Okay, so if Maya has created any value on those two, zero that out. Here. So use the toe tip, same as what you did on the passing post, to create a desired angle on the foot. Make sure that the toes are still bending backwards. And keep this foot a little more back. So if on your contacts you have on this foot negative 12 value, since the ground is moving it backwards before it got lifted up, I would probably, when you raise it up, either keep it on negative 12 or even maybe negative 14 or 16. So this is what makes the cycle a little bit more complicated, because you kind of have to account for that backwards motion of the foot. Does that make sense? But really, if you compare those 2 feet, that back foot is actually a little bit closer, getting a little bit closer to the front foot. So it is starting that forward motion. It's just because of the treadmill effect, we kind of have to keep it back a little bit more. Okay, so as far as the how much to raise the foot up, we'll look from the orthographic side view. And make sure that the toes are not penetrating the ground. And you can also feel free to raise the foot up simply by moving that selection curve higher. Leave the pull vector, so the knee control, away from the knee. So this is, if you get into this position, this is fine position for the both feet in the down pose. Okay, so when you get the feet where they roughly need to be, then we can now relate the hip action. So it is a down pose, right? So hips need to go down lower. I can also look what Maya has done with those hips. You see, Maya has started moving the hips down, but it did not move them lower than the passing pose. So guys, I hope it makes sense that this is not good, that those hips need to be on its extreme low position on the down pose. So I have two choices. I can take the pose here in a perspective window and lower and key, and you see how that has changed the value of key in a graph editor. And of course, I hope it makes sense by now that I can also simply do the same effect by moving the point in the graph editor view. Okay, so now this tells me after a certain neutral position on a contact, the body hits a low point on a down pose and starts going back up. And then on frame 10, we're going to have the up pose where the point's going to hit the highest value. That makes sense? So you're establishing ups and downs of the body by using the hip or cog translated Y. See the hips go down? So now, what's left here? Let's see, translate Z. We did add another key here by keying that in between, and it's at 0. So it's still not moving forward and back, and that's the best thing to leave. I do not mind if you actually create a slight back and forward pattern of the body in your walk cycle, but you're not required to. Rotate X similar, as we don't have anything done and there's nothing here, so this is fine. So rotate Y, guys. So this is where we kind of introduce the favoring concept. Okay, so you do guys realize we're looking now at the newly created down pose. And what I'm looking here is the Y rotation of the hips. So this is the rotation on contact. So we have extreme rotation, then we go into the down pose, and then we go in a passing pose that has no rotation. So can you see the placement of the value of this? So here we have an extreme value. It goes from 0 to, let's say, 28. Here, this value is totally at 0 level, so it has no rotation. So extreme rotation, no rotation. So in the up and down poses, you need to favor the extreme rotation of one neighboring key, either the previous or following. So which one is the extreme? First or second? The third key. First one, yes. So the value of this needs to favor that value. So you need to make it closer to 28 than it's to 0. So roughly, if you think of 2/3 of this, that makes sense? Mm-hmm. So it could be either 2/3 or 3/4. I would not, that's a good, safe estimate of how much to do to favor something. So based on this is what Maya has done. Did Maya do a good job? Is it favoring the previous key?
I think so. Yeah.
It is. Mm-hmm. Because it's roughly, this distance is roughly 2/3 of this distance. Okay? If this point was lower down, that would be wrong, because in the case it would be closer in value to 0. So you don't want to favor anything that has a 0 value, because it has no movement. It's like, what are you favoring? Nothing. So you want to favor where something happens. What is happening here? Really, it's about change of this rotation. What favoring does the slowdown effect. You know the slowdown from 2D animation? So as you start getting close to the extreme rotation that you're going to have, you start slowing down in order to go back to other direction. you slow down on this side. So basically, you're creating a slow in and slow out by controlling the favor. So before you hit the extreme of something, you slow down towards it, unless you're doing something extremely fast. But walk is not. So theoretically, yes, I could take this point and maybe move it a little bit up higher. Okay, so that will be still good. What will be wrong is moving this point past the extreme. That makes sense? Because now you have created an extreme rotation on the down pose, which on some other walk you can maybe establish as a pattern, but not on this one. Also, the error would be keeping it down like this, or even something like this, where you flatline. So you don't have any slowdown at all. This is wrong. So, okay, figure out, is the previous key extreme or following? Obviously, the previous key is extreme, favor, about 2/3. Same or similar logic applies for the rotate Z. You tell me, guys, is the previous key extreme value in Z, or is it following key? What do you think? Following key. Anybody disagrees? Okay. So I need to favor that value with about 2/3. Okay. So this down pose, should I move it up? Or should I move it down? Let's third one try down. Anybody disagrees? Well, it should go down because, again, the following key in this case is the extreme tilt of the body. So on this down pose, we have almost as much tilt, but not quite. Okay? So this is an example where Maya have left this key in the middle point. So that's not a good choice by Maya. This is something that you will need to catch and improve. That makes sense? We're going to repeat this with the spine. Okay? We're going to let you guys help me with it. So once you go down this list with the hips, now you can simply click on your spine control. And there are two things to check: Y rotation and Z rotation. So if you're doing all of them at once, remember to select all 3 Y rotations. So of the low back, so hold down command, mid back, and up back. So now I have here all 3. Is this acceptable? You have one try, yes. More?
Move it up more
Move it up.
towards the extreme.
Which one is the extreme?
So that's third one.
Third one is
Oh, no,
extreme?
sorry, the
No,
first one.
First one?
So it should be good.
Correct. Okay, so I do need to move it a little more down, right? Well, whatever Maya did, this distance here is closer in its value to this. Okay, so this is favoring. Because this is 20, and this is 0. And this is roughly around 14. That's about 2/3 of the total tilt. So whatever Maya has done here is acceptable. So if you just, this happens to you, if you follow my steps correctly and Maya ends up doing this for you, that's acceptable. You don't have to do anything. If you're not sure, yes, you can make it a little more extreme. So now I'm getting a little more of a 3/4 of the total distance. You can tell, if you can use the grid, see I have 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So it's about 3/4 of the total distance. If you cannot remember the 2/3. Then you need to check the Z rotation of the spine. Again, if you want to do all 3 at once, hold command, that's just selecting. Okay, look at the pose that you're working on. You tell me, guys, what I'm doing with this. Where is the extreme? Previous key or following key? Following key, that's correct. So should I move this up or down? Okay, is that good enough?
Too
That's good. I mean, that's roughly somewhere between what I'm asking for, the 2/3 or 3/4. If I do this, is this good?
No.
Okay, so, some of you are starting to get this, some of you will keep struggling, and that's mostly because you might still struggle, you still don't know the difference between contact and passing pose, stuff like this. Which rotation should be in which pose. So, you need to learn that. So, well, there's still the neck up, that you would have 2 rotations to double check. So, Y rotation, well, it's acceptable as it is, I just might push it a bit. And Z rotation, usually mine doesn't do well. I need to make sure if there was the extreme, that happens to be in the following view. So now you have correct rotations on down pose, yes.
With the neck, do you just want us to keep the rotation so it's always facing forward, or?
I would prefer, if it happens that when you do correct graph editor, that the head starts turning sideways, I would prefer the graph editor correct. Because it's actually okay that head moves a little bit left and right. I don't want it frozen. Okay? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So yeah, don't break the progression of the curves by making the head look straight. Okay? And if you did everything fine and correctly and consistently, you really won't have that problem. What's left on the down pose to get it completed is that arm swing now. So making the arm swing extreme. So to do this, I need to take a good look at what's happening on the contact. So what I'm really measuring now is how far are 2 wrists from each other and how far they are from the hip. I'm kind of just making a mental connection. Okay, so on this down pose, it seems like Maya is actually moving the arms closer together. That's not good. So in the down pose, whatever swing you have on a contact, you need to increase it. So it means that if I go from previous contact to the newly created down pose, this arm needs to go a little more forward. And I'm going to add that overlapping action on the fingers here, and then take the back arm and move it here, and also put a little more motion with the fingers here. Notice, so the same arm is forward, I have just increased the arm swing. That makes sense? So the down poses have the extreme arm swing. So the arm swings from down pose to down pose. And the position of the arms on a contact is simply a slowdown into the down pose. It can also be tweaked a bit later, if needed. Okay, we'll keep working on this, so give it a try, take a note, try to remember that there's something a little bit special that you need to do with the arms and the down pose, and use the PDF to remind you. So this is a completed down pose. Any questions on the down pose? Anything that I can repeat fast? No? Okay, let's move to the up pose then. If you were doing this, guys, I would expect you now to do next, go to the frame 16 and create the second down pose, right? For the sake of the speed in this lecture, I'm starting to do the up pose immediately, because I don't have time to do all 4 of them. Okay, so let's assume I have my both down poses done. So now on frame 10, I'm creating an up pose. Okay, so I will, again, use a Maya in between as a starting point for the up pose. And this is really, using Maya in between is helpful only, again, I'm repeating, if you have your Contacts and passing poses done correctly. If you created an in-between between two incorrectly done poses, that's what they use. Okay, so I go to frame 10, select all, switch to the outer tangent for a moment. So this gives me an in-between on frame 10 that I'm going to steal by keying it. Let's switch back to step. So on frame 10, I have the starting point for creating an up pose. So again, I will start with a foot that carries the weight, because this is what the rest of the body relates to. Okay, so we have the backwards motion. Okay, so we got the foot starting at 12 translate Z, going to 6, then to 0. So on frame 10, I would like, the best thing to keep it even backward motion would be -6. -6, press enter and key it. So now, we're keeping the treadmill as it turns at an even speed, right? It doesn't speed up and slow down constantly, other than when you're starting it or stopping it, right? So the idea is that the background is moving at a constant speed, and your foot is trying to match it. Okay? So if you're doing a cycle, you would try to find out at which speed we are moving the background to match the feet as much as you can. This is not possible to always do in a game, so that in the games the feet very often would slide a little bit, right? But they do try to at least match it to some degree. Okay, so I took care of the foot. No, not quite yet. There's something I want to get your attention to. Okay. So notice this foot on this up pose. Maya has started in-betweening this lift heel. See that? It is flat on the ground on the passing pose, and on the up pose, we're starting to lift the heel. That is perfectly fine. Just leave that. Because having a little lift heel is going to let you move the hips up higher without locking the leg. And notice that on the up pose, the lift heel is smaller than it's on a following contact. You don't want it to be higher. So it's just gradually peeling off the ground towards being lifted. So the other leg, again, appears to be doing what it needs to do, but Maya is not doing it right. So again, raised foot should have no heel and lift heel, and you see that is some heel value, so I'm going to zero that out. Here. I cannot see any obvious toe lift, and the toes need to be bent down with raised feet during the walk. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of dragging those toes by bending them down. And so I still have a little bit of problem that Maya moves things in a straight line. So probably would be a good idea to take this foot and just keep it a little bit higher for a nicer arc. So you see, this foot, we actually end up with 3 breakdown points for this foot to get from point A to point B. It's kind of same concept that I'm trying you guys to try to apply. That any motion, if you break it down with 3 breakdowns, you're kind of getting good arcs, and the good things will happen for you or start happening, and you have something to work with if you need to improve something. Okay, the feet are done. Questions about feet? Okay, let's keep moving on. So we're still at the up pose. So again, when you're doing body rotations, always start with the hips. So select the hips, and go down this list. So if I look at the translate X, I missed the translate X on the down pose. Nobody caught it. Everything. I can see it now. This is side to side motion. Okay, on the down pose, does this favor anything? No. Should I move it down or up?
Yeah.
So on this up pose, is this favoring? Yes, it is. So this will be acceptable if you wanna increase it, go ahead. I would not recommend to do too extreme favoring because our rig is not quite well done to handle that. I think the legs will start stretching if you do too much of favoring. So translate Y. Translate Y is up and down of the body. Okay, so this is what Maya has done. Is this body going up on highest point? No, it's not. It is moving up, but not enough. At this point on up poses, the hips need to be on their highest. So what we really need to do is this. Can you see? Can you tell? Do you understand? So by doing this, I have actually moved the hips higher than it's on a previous and following key. And I tried not to lock that leg. So I did not move it any higher. If you need body to go any higher, then you probably have to add a little bit more of the lift heel on this foot. So try to avoid it if possible. Okay, key it. So now I have going from a contact down, then on passing pose starts going up, and then only up pose if it's the high point, and then following contact starts going down again. So now I have the up and down of the first step established. So the weight of the character. Sideways, same thing. We shift the weight from one leg to the other. Okay, so let's finish those rotations. So translate translate Z. Again, it's still not moving character forward, so everything is at 0. Rotate X, we're not going to use it, so everything is at 0 value. So now we have the rotate Y. So this is what Maya is offering us. Is it acceptable? Can you see it? It is, yes. If you're not sure, yeah, you can make it a bit more extreme. But what Maya has done, we accept it as correct. Here is what Maya has done. Now, we fixed already the 0 rotations before. But, so this value favors the extreme, which happens to be in a previous key. Okay, so then once you finish the hips, click on your spine and do all 3 Y rotations first. Is this favoring, guys? Yes, somebody disagrees? You're going to disagree, you'll be punished for it, but you might have to listen to me explain why you might be wrong. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Okay? Rather know that we need to work on something more. Then check all 3 Z rotations. Again, I'm repeating, if you cannot work with all 3 of them at once, then do one at a time, starting with the low one, going up. And again, this is acceptable. Obviously, the extreme is on a previous key, and based on this up pose, the Z rotation is close to that previous key value. It's further away from the 0 point. Just end up with the neck up. And same logic. You have to know your rotations, when they need to be established, where should you have your extremes, and then favor them. This is good. Here, this is good as well. And that's done. Okay, so the up body rotations are done correctly. So possible mistakes can be that you're only rotating 1 or 2 out of 3 spine rotations, so you're going to lose some points on that. You might have 1 or 2 rotations correct, and on the third one you, forget to rotate, or you just don't want to rotate something. So if you have something like this, I hope it makes sense that this is not good curve progression. Because you have 3 keys keeping the same rotation without doing anything, and then it just pops to the extreme level. So you have to remember the concept of favoring, and you have to make sure that you don't make assumption that something is an extreme without looking at it and making sure that it's done correctly. Okay, so what else to do to just complete the passing pose? Well, really, what I expect you here is just to double check the arms, make sure they are not overextended, that they have a nice arc, and they have a little bit of a drag. So there's not that much to do. So it doesn't matter which arm you're starting with. So take note where the arm was previously. So this arm is overextended, so this is a good time to fix this. So now this arm is moving back. So this arm is still overextended, so I'm going to move it that box a little bit up, just until I see that elbow relax back. See it. Make sure that the arm continues its backwards motion. Okay, fixing the long arm. So I look at this in the orthographic side view. So on a down pose is extreme forward, starts passing the body, passes the body, and then starts slowing down before hitting another down pose. So the arm swinging needs to be clean and smooth. The arm should not be going back and forward or stopping in a place. That's all I'm looking for the arm swing. And don't place the hand or arm in a position that's overextended and or uncomfortable. Any question about the arm swing or anything else? You guys had enough of this? Probably. Well, it is technical. I admit it. It's a little bit like a math. But once you master this, it's gonna be you will not even think about it. Then you can start applying all of this, and in your very creative story or animation that you're trying to do. Okay. So it's, if you're playing a guitar, you're gonna spend hours and hours getting your fingers bloody and calloused, and then improving your sense for rhythm, melody, and then you're gonna start creating your own take on your song. There are a few geniuses that just pick up guitar and just get it, but those are very few people. Most of us really need to work hard on whatever you're doing. Okay. So I hope. Okay. So now, any questions or anything that you would like me to reinforce, repeat, or you can just go on a break. So try, try to, again, get your contacts and passing poses correct, and then try to get at least down poses done correctly, if you cannot do all of them. Okay, and then we'll just finish it the next lecture, get it to a clean, fine state. Okay, ready for break? Well, be back at 10 minutes after 3. We did finish today on time.
Awesome.
Yay.